Welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hi, this is Jessica with Turn the Page podcast, and my librarian co-host today is
Stacy,
and our special guest is
CJ Cooke.
Welcome to Turn the Page, CJ.
Thank you.
I think, as I mentioned before, your book was like one of those ones that as soon as it came up, we were like, yeah, let's do this one. This is totally up our alley.
Yeah. However, I do have to say, because I saw the book like promos for it, and I was like, oh yeah, this looks really cool. This looks really cool. And then when we got asked, like, oh, are you interested in interviewing? I was like, yeah, she seems like a great author. This is great. And it took me like a few days to connect, like, oh, this is the author of the book I got really excited for.
Oh, that's good to hear.
So first of all, where are you recording out of right now?
I am at home in Glasgow. Well, I'm 30 minutes outside Glasgow city centre, but yeah, I'm in Scotland, Glasgow.
I'm so jealous.
Oh,
Scotland is one
wow.
of my favorite places in the world.
Mine too. I love it. It's so nice. I love it. I just moved here last Christmas.
Oh, from where?
Oh, that's so nice.
Well, I'd lived. I'm Northern Irish, so I'm originally from Belfast.
Oh, nice.
In Northern Ireland. But I had spent 15 years in England, on the very coast of the north of England, and I've been working at the University of Glasgow for 6 years now. So we finally decided to move, so I didn't have this crazy commute between England and Scotland. So yeah, but it's lovely. I just love it here. We're right in the countryside. It's beautiful. It's cold, but it's just lovely. So I couldn't be happier.
So this actually connects really well to your book.
Indeed, yes.
Indeed. Okay, so there's a lot going on in your book, and we have not as much time to cover all the ground we want. So there's a bunch of different stories, one of which is the story of Lexi, who is desperately trying to escape a life that she tried to end in the beginning of the book.
Yeah. She's at rock bottom when we begin. I love Lexi and I miss Lexi. So I wish I'd written a series of books in which Lexi could star, but she just strolled. When I started writing this, I had this sort of idea for, I had the sort of different elements of the story that I wanted to write about, and I thought this would be quite a serious book. But Lexi strolled onto the page and ended up being very funny and very witty, and I liked her enormously, and it was different. The tone is different. I didn't expect her to be funny. But yeah, so Lexi is, she's, as you say, rock bottom at the beginning. She's had a lot of trauma. And I think her story for me is about confronting that trauma and kind of dealing with it in ways that are healthier and coming up to the surface and recognizing her worth and what she has to contribute. And it's through her relationship with the little girls that she ends up being a nanny for, I think, that she really deals with it so well.
And so she ends up taking the identity of somebody else and moving to Norway to become a nanny for, first of all, there's a little girl named Gaia, which is the perfect name for a child in this story, because there is a lot about nature and how Mother Nature relates to what we do to try to tame it, and Coco.
That is right. Yeah. So, Gaia, I had to think about what parents like Tom and Aurelia and their principles and so on, what they would call their firstborn. And Gaia, given that Mother Nature and Tom and Aurelia have such, good intentions in the story for how they want to build their property and how they want to treat the planet and so on. But so it's that relationship between Lexi and her charge, Gaia, was super important to me. And Gaia really became such a strong character in the story as well. I just loved Gaia. So I really, it's really important to me. Like, I really, really hope that when people read this story, obviously I'm talking a lot about how it's spooky and it's gothic and so on, but at the heart of it for me is this story of these little girls who have lost their mother, and they're so young and so vulnerable, and their father is really struggling to cope as well, and they're left in the care of someone who's not even a nanny. Really, she's no training whatsoever. She's probably the worst person that you'd on, you know, on paper you'd never leave your child in the care of someone like Lexi, and yet it works out, and she benefits from it, and these little girls benefit from it, and that was really, I was so focused on those relationships unfolding, and so I hope that story really comes across for readers.
Absolutely. It was really very nice. And I love that it was set in Norway.
Yes, yes.
I like
Me
that
too.
too.
Yeah. I didn't. I don't know why I chose to set it in Norway. I mean, there's a few things. I knew the setting had to be important. I'd set the last book, I Know My Name, in Crete, and that was a really important setting. And so I put out a call on my Facebook author page saying, you know, where should I set the next one? It's going to be gothic and so on. And someone mentioned Iceland, and someone mentioned the Faroe Islands, and I had thought of Scandinavia. And when I looked into Norway, I thought, yeah, I think that kind of matches what I envisage. And there's a scene or a line in the book where Lexi says that Norway makes her think of the inside of her brain. And I suppose that was my thinking. I was like, yeah, it's so dramatic and so hostile, but so beautiful. So it doesn't seem like the sort of place that's very human friendly. And that was the case because I went there 4 times, and Norway is beautiful, and it's rugged and it's so on, but it is quite, you know, it's not human friendly, if you like. It's a realm that's built for animals and, you know, things that can survive the harshness of that climate. I mean, when I went, it was winter, and I was right at the top of, like, it was what they used to call the top of the known world, right by the Russian border, past the Arctic Circle, and there was just no light. Like, it was pitch black
Oh
for like the
wow.
whole day, and for 2 hours a day, you would get this little sort of dusk light. It wouldn't be sunlight. The sun didn't rise above that level, you know. And I thought, gosh, like, it takes a lot to survive, to cope here, just to mentally cope and function. But people had obviously adapted, and the shops were all open, and it was just like a normal kind of place, except it was pitch black and we were in the middle of nowhere. So yeah, Norway's fabulous, and I just want to write a whole series of stories set in Norway now so I can go back.
That's awesome.
I loved it.
So you have like a lot of unreliable narrators also in this
Yes.
book. And I do have to ask a question.
Yeah.
And I don't know if this was just my brain picking up on something. Was there like a very slight reference to the book Verity in there?
No.
Oh, okay.
What's your question, Jessica?
Well, no, because it's Lexi posing as someone else gets a recommendation from somebody named Verity, and then there's also a diary, which actually is a big part of the book Verity. So I was like, ooh.
Oh wow.
Oh.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh, right. And you know, it's funny you say that, because I heard that Ruth Ware's book, I think Turn of the Key,
Yeah.
on Goodreads, a lot of people have been saying, oh, it begins how the Turn of the Key begins, and I gathered that there's this similar kind of way that she becomes a nanny, and I thought, oh my gosh, I hope she doesn't think I like stole that.
No, not at all. It was, because it's an interesting conversation. It's not at all. It was just, and it didn't feel at all like it was derived. It felt like a possible nod, but I think that it's pretty cool that you know, it just shows how many dark books I'm reading lately. So you play with
Dark books and
mythology
thrillers.
also in this book.
Yeah. I love, well, I'm a storyteller, and I'm interested in where stories come from, and what stories we tell ourselves, and what stories, you know, we're telling others that skirt around the truth. And so I had actually, in the sort of first draft that I sent my publisher, I put some folk tales in, but not as many as I have right now in the final version. But when I can do weird really well, And I kind of rein it in because I worry that it's too weird. I should for the genre I'm writing. I'm not writing like high fantasy or anything, but I don't know. I that's probably my natural inclination or something. But I had the I won't give it too much away, but in the story I had this scene where she finds these animal prints in her room that go nowhere. So it's not just weird that there's an animal, but it's like they just stop. And my editor loved this. And I was like, really? And she loved the kind of little taster of folk tales. And she's like, you should do more of that. I was like, right. I was kind of given permission to go full on weird. So I just loved, I didn't use original folk tales. I read some Norse folk tales, but I wanted to kind of use folk tales in a way that conceptualized the world of my story and also symbolized the kind of emotional stories in this book. So they do the folk tales for me, like there's a story in there about a man who turns into a wolf, and for me that's really representing Tom, and there's another one about a raven and these two nestlings, and that's really, for me, that's Lexi. So yeah, there was a sort of symbolic register that was important for me to capture via these folk tales.
Well, it really
adds to like the creepiness too of the darkness of happening in the thriller.
Yes.
Yeah, it really was quite beautiful. So I think anything more will pretty much spoil the story, and I don't want to do that. Although if I had 20 minutes more with you, I'd be like, so what's this about? But are you working on anything right now?
Well, I've just finished. I'm just finishing up next year's book, and it's called the Wildling. So similar title, but it's called The Wildling, and it's set here in Scotland, but not in Glasgow. We're sort of in the south of Scotland. This one's set in the Scottish Highlands, and it's set on an island, specifically in a lighthouse, where the main character, she's a single mother of 3 daughters, and she's an artist. So she's there painting a big mural on the inside of this lighthouse, and she begins to find that there's a real history and a real tragedy to this place. There's a lot of witch hunts and a lot of witch trials, and actually the witches were held underneath the lighthouse in this sort of cave. But I became interested in Scotland's witch hunts. I didn't really know until fairly recently that Scotland had the worst witch hunts in Europe, and
absolutely, yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's a restaurant in Edinburgh which is it's got a witchy name, and I can't remember exactly what it is, but I think they say that there were a lot of like trials right outside the restaurant. So it's a lovely restaurant, but the history is like
a little dark.
20 minutes down the road from where I live, there's like a plaque, and that's where they hung all these witches. Well, witches,
right? Yes, quote unquote.
So it's so like there, but it's to me it's been kind of invisible, and right now there's a lot of talk about sort of pardoning these individuals who weren't witches. Obviously, they were tortured into confessing. So I wanted to write about that kind of history and what collisions there are between the past and the present.
So thank you so much, CJ Cooke. This was Jessica and
Stacey,
and we were here with
CJ Cooke.
And we're going to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Come back and talk about the witch book with us.
I will. Yes.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.